The sun is shining. It's 27 degrees outside. The British summer has arrived. And we have been told by the weather forecasters that it's going to last for at least 24 hours. Welcome to the Internet Seriously. I'm Lucien Taylor from Oxford.
I'm Emily Taylor from Oxford.
I'm Joanna Grant from Oxford.
And I'm Kieren McCarthy in London.
Thank you. And today we have our first official guest on the internet.
Joanna.
On the Internet Seriously. It's our own Joanna Grant. She's our junior IT consultant, and we're really proud to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so today on the Internet Seriously, we're going to be talking about Joanna and what she's doing and things that she wants to talk about, which is quantum computing. And also, we've had to rejiggle things a bit because today is not a good sunny day for Microsoft. There's a global outage that we're in the middle of at the moment, and of course that really affects the internet, and we can't do the Internet Seriously without talking about something like that. So first of all, Joanna, welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to have you on our podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I did A-levels in maths, biology, chemistry and computer science, and then I did what's called a cyber EPQ, which stands for Extended Project Qualification. And you can write an essay on whatever you want, as long as it's cyber related. And so I chose to write my cyber EPQ on quantum computing. Since then, quantum computers have changed quite a lot, and that's why I wanted to talk about it on the podcast today.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But you didn't start, did you? You did all of these sort of techie
Yes.
qualifications, and
Yes.
something made you do something more artsy at the beginning. Do you want to
Yes.
tell us why and why you did that?
Yes, I've always loved art, and I dropped it for A-level. And during my A-levels, I worked quite hard, and I missed the artistic side of things, and I wanted to go back to exploring with different techniques and paints and try to develop that a bit further. I was also curious as to whether I could make a living out of art, whether that could be a career for me. And so I decided to do a foundation course in art and design at Oxford Brookes University, which proved that I wasn't going to become a full-time artist. But I'm very, very glad that I did it because I learned a lot about myself, and I've met some really amazing people on the way. And it's confirmed that I do want a career in tech, which is what I was contemplating at the start, is do I want to go down the art road and become an artist, or do I want to focus on tech?
And Emily, I'm just thinking about that binary choice that Joanna felt she had to make, and I want to come back to you and challenge that because Emily and I both originated in the arts, and we've come to tech. And do we see them as two completely separate things? But first of all, I want to give you a stat, both of you, women in tech. LinkedIn reported, well, in fact, the government itself on their Gov UK business blog amplified the fact that LinkedIn reported last year that only 19% of UK tech workers are women, and women only hold 5% of leadership positions in the tech industry. So I'm thinking, why, you've got art in your heart, but you think you need to go to tech. But Emily, why are so few women, why do they feel that it's like this sort of...
It's really mysterious to me, and I'm I feel like in a way I'm kind of an interloper in the tech world because I never have been a computer programmer. I did my first degree in classics, Latin and Greek. As you said, Lucien, I spent a couple of years as a professional actor and then kind of bridged into law. So I came up through a very sort of circuitous route, and I'm not a techie person. I love data and I love data analysis. But where Joanna is coming from, I'm so excited for you because, with your background with maths and computing and the sciences, as well as art, I feel like this is such a great combination for a career in technology. And often I think we're encouraged to view ourselves as binary, in all sorts of ways, but sort of like you are an arty person or you're a techie person, you are a creative person or you are a not creative person. And I think one of the lovely things about being in a kind of frontier type of environment like technology is that you have people who've come from all sorts of different backgrounds, because there hasn't been a career. For you, for your generation, it is much more established than it was for me and Lucien.
I can report that Joanna's a very fine techie in the pure sort of mathematics tech, doing quality control, things like that, doing testing, which actually is a really challenging area. But I want to put it to you: do you see that is the beginning of this sort of journey for you, saying goodbye to the arts, or do you think there's going to be opportunities to interweave those skills?
I think the skills can be interweaved quite easily, but I think I realised this year during the art course that actually I'm not an artsy person. So what I mean by that is most of my drawings before I started the course were very realistic, attention to detail. And because they're so realistic, you're sort of looking at patterns in real life and then replicating that on the paper. So it was actually quite programmatic in a way, and quite more technical than just being creative and doing whatever you feel on the page. It was more mathematical in a way, which I realised.
Dare I say digital, and I don't want to get into AI art, but I think we also hear about this with musicians. Emily and I are musicians.
It's to do with patterns and
rhythms. It's very much patterns. Yeah. We have an official bell ringer in our company who says it's all mathematics. We'll get him on the show one day to talk about that. But Kieren, you have two daughters. Do you see them as having a tech future?
Well, I would have said until recently, not really, because they're both very creative types. But my daughter just got the school award for computing, and she got it because they were making a game, and she wanted to make it look pretty and have fun with it. So she did a whole bunch of stuff to this game that the computer teacher couldn't figure out how she did it. So he was digging in the code. Like, how do you do that? She goes, I just did this and I just did that. I thought it'd be fun. And he was blown away by it. So it really is the sort of the melding. If you want to get something out of it and you sort of instinctively understand how things work on that sort of logical level, then yes, so I would say that based on that probably my daughter would be quite good at computer science, because she grasped some code that the teacher didn't grasp, because she wanted it to change colors and she wanted some music to play at the same time the ball was hit. It was remarkable, really.
I think if the sort of for women starting in this career, there is a lack of role models. But it actually, when you go back to the very beginning of computing, people like Ada Lovelace, who was Lord Byron's daughter, also a laudanum addict and a very interesting person. She is credited with creating the first computer type program to try and create a betting modelling machine with her friend Charles Babbage. And then there's also people like Hedy Lamarr, who was like the most beautiful woman in the world, but she also invented a lot of the underlying protocols that are used today in Wi-Fi and GPS. So there are role models, and there were also, of course, during the World War II, many of the code breakers were women. So it's a.
Oh, you didn't like to mention that, though, do we?
No, but it's interesting that the area was sort of subsequently colonised, and women were told that they were not. That it was no good for them and they were no good for it, and that's just complete rubbish.
So before we move on to your subject that we all want to talk about as well, I'm going to ask you, we put all our guests through a torture and we ask them two pre-prepared questions. Our first question is, what's your guilty pleasure online?
My guilty pleasure online is YouTube Shorts, because I try to stay away from social media. So the only two apps that I have are WhatsApp and YouTube. And I've got YouTube simply because it's useful for learning how to do things. So if the bulb goes in my car, I know how to fix it. I just look it up on YouTube. But it's not all just YouTube tutorials. There's now YouTube Shorts, which are just short clips that you just scroll through, and that's quite dangerous.
I'm also guilty of that, and I noticed the algorithm looks at what you're interested in once. So I'm a Swiftie, so I get lots of Taylor Swift shorts. What are yours?
Mine are all sorts: cats, crochet.
Nice. Yeah.
Yep.
Very in line with Emily's guilty pleasures online.
I could
Anyway,
watch cats
now
forever.
moving on, quantum computing. It's back in the news this week because we found that Oxford Ionics, a company very near us, has found a way to manufacture at scale semiconductors and chips that in the usual traditional semiconductor fabrication plants, which is really important because, as you were talking about last year, Emily, these plants are not just some space that you set up. They cost a fortune. They're really high, and so they found a way of doing quantum chips. So tell us a bit about your interest in quantum computing and why it's interesting for you.
It was interesting for me because quantum computers have the potential to completely destroy all encryption methods that we use today, pretty much. And I was quite alarmed when I first learned this. So I was like, we've got to learn how they work and how to prevent it, really. And when I wrote my EPQ last year, my conclusion was that they're actually not that big of a threat because, like you say, they're very expensive to build and they use qubits, which are very fragile.
Now, just remind me of qubits. I've been doing I must admit this, I am an engineer, but Kieren, I'll let you have this first because you're a journalist. Just quickly, what's a qubit?
Oh my God.
Thank you very much. Qubits use superposition to determine the value of two values at the same time, both the distance from 0 and the distance from 1 at the same time.
Yes.
Which is, I can't really get much more than that, but it enables you to do is use existing computing technology, architecture and resources, but at a hyper scale.
Yes.
And so everything's faster and everything's cheaper once you figure out how to do it. And Oxford Ionics think that they can capture their own basically ions, how to control ions to create a way of actually processing this in a cost-effective way. And so it's opening the gates potentially to this expanded use.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because, like I was saying, qubits are really fragile. So just things like noise will completely decohere them. So that means that the superposition is destroyed and the qubit will either collapse into a 0 or a 1 and just become a normal bit, which isn't very helpful when you're trying to build a quantum computer. So they've got to be kept in they're housed in these sealed containers, which are kept at temperatures very close to absolute 0, which, as you can imagine, is extremely difficult to maintain.
Yes.
And they've also got no atmospheric pressure. So the fact that they're going to be able to build these quantum computers in a normal environment is
very exciting. Emily,
exciting.
you did a paper on this. Where are you at with quantum computing? Do you think it's the end of the encryption world that we know?
Well, potentially, as you say, Joanna, because the strongest encryption that we have today would be vulnerable to brute force attacks and being decrypted by a super powered computing that quantum would enable. But luckily for us, this is a known problem. And there is an awful lot of work going on in standards bodies to try to create quantum safe cryptography. And also in one of the standards bodies, the European standards bodies, ETSI, there is also, I think, some very interesting work to actually try and cope with encryption after the legacy, because like anything where there's a step change, like quantum computing, it won't go like light switch on and now everyone's with a quantum computer. There will be a huge legacy problem. So there will be a very, very messy transition in which encryption has to be still protected. So there is work going on there. I don't think they've solved it yet, and there are lots and lots of very competitive forces going on. Quantum computing is a sort of a real frontier. So it will be no surprise to learn that China is heavily investing in it, so is the United States, so is the European Union. The UK, having removed itself from those blocks, is doing its bit, but at a very much smaller scale.
And I'm interested what you're saying, and Kieren, this thing of the UK removing itself from the race, the game. But I think Emily was alluding to selling the ARM chip to China, and I'm interested that Oxford Ionics. I was looking at another post of theirs. They've actually hired one of the directors from ARM to be part of this team. My appeal to them, Kieren, what do you think? Are they going to flog this as well? It's fantastic new breakthrough.
I mean, it's the ongoing arms race, isn't it? Well, I mean, I hate when we say arms race. It's just technology moving
forward.
Arm
race.
One arm race, yeah. It's just technology moving forward. People will come up with more forms of encryption. People will come up with more forms of fast computing to tackle it. And we tend to focus on things like encryption and cracking encryption because it's sort of, spy-like and exciting and also a little worrying. If people can read what's going on. But it's fundamentally, it's just incredible movements in technology. I mean, it's mind-blowing. Even not very long ago, this stuff was almost non-existent. It's mind-blowing how fast this moves and what we're able to do right now.
And if ever we can get to a stage where we can actually process at this sort of scale back in our own offices. I mean, in our organisation, we're processing big data all the time. It costs an absolute fortune on the cloud. So that if there's a way that we can bring it back off the cloud in a more cost-effective way, that's surely going to be good for the smaller players. Which, talking about doing things on the cloud, brings us to our next point, and it also gives me a sort of an idea for my own Room 101, which is putting bad patches on the cloud into the Room 101. But first of all, I'm going to ask Joanna our next setup question, which is, what is your Tech Room 101?
Adverts.
Oh, all adverts. All adverts.
Not all adverts. I understand that people have to advertise and that's how people make money. But there's a point where when you're bombarded with adverts, it's very frustrating. If you open an article and you just want to read the article and you get 20 pop-up adverts at the top and on the bottom and everywhere in between, it's very, very annoying.
Also, Kieren, you work for The Guardian. I'll come back to you on that. As one of and you've worked for other things, The Register, many things that you've written for. The Guardian, I open that up and it's interleaved with adverts and appeals all the time. What's the problem there?
The problem is people don't pay for news. That's the problem. That's why. It's for money. If you don't buy a newspaper or don't have a digital subscription, you have to make the money to pay the journalists and so on. And so you run ads.
So Joanna, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but here you have a poor journalist in a house. He can't even afford to decorate the room he's in. How's he going to make money if they don't bombard young people online with adverts? Or is there a middle way?
I think there's a middle way. Like I said, you can have adverts because I understand people have to make money, but I think there should be a limit to the number of adverts that you can.
So it's really the quantity
it's the
of
quantity,
adverts,
yeah,
and the disruptive nature.
Is, yeah.
And I think that's a fantastic Room 101 that would go with my cookie notices as well. Numbers of adverts that are interleaved on, and
just the sheer volume. Of
I also find that sometimes a site that I'm not familiar with, if I go into it and there's a ton of adverts just like flashing, sort of like you feel like you're going to have some sort of fit, then that's sort of a big indicator to me about whether I want to be on that site, and I normally navigate away. I think there's some Igor's been trying to attract our attention about some comments on the socials. Is that right? But I'm not sure. No.
Okay, well, we're very new to... Oh, yes, I did want to mention what you're seeing on the screen now is our social channels for the Internet Seriously. Yes. Please join, please follow, please check out when we're going to... Generally, it's at 10:30 in the morning BST on Fridays. Please join, and eventually, this is the first live stream we've ever done. We're going to figure out how to answer your comments as well. But if anyone places any comments now, we will follow up and get back to you with those. So we're on our final subject today, which is we're in the middle of a Microsoft global outage. It's a cloud outage. It's hit everybody. It's through a bad patch through a cybersecurity company called CrowdStrike. The rumours are that it's just a cock up. It's not actually a part of a cyber attack or anything like that. Our consultant here, our CEO Emily Taylor, does a lot of commentary on the news and things about these sort of things as they happen. Emily, how many calls have you had today? How many appointments have you got today?
A few. They're lining up. So I'll be speaking to. Well, maybe speaking to Sky later on if they're back up, because they were actually offline, offline.
You're joking.
Their whole news service was taken offline. So
what? It takes off cameras and microphones?
I think all of that. So this is a sort of one of those points in time where you just reflect on how dependent everybody is on a small number of tech providers. So when something goes wrong with, say, Microsoft Cloud because of it looks like a bad update from cybersecurity company CrowdStrike, that has a sort of it is like a virus spreading right across society. So here GP surgeries are out. Sky News was taken offline. Trains are disrupted. Flights are disrupted, and so you see in every sector this sort of disruption. And it really kind of makes us reflect on, how do we get our societies resilient to this? Is it a problem that we are so dependent on such a small number of big providers?
Kieren, this isn't the first global outage we've had of major platform providers, is it?
No, we've had quite a few of these. The problem with this one is, well, CrowdStrike up until now have been highly trusted, and they're also given very deep access, because this bit of software that's gone wrong, this poor update, is there to stop hacking, basically people from hacking into your system. So it has quite deep access. They've clearly put out a bad update, and that has caused, everybody to be treated as if they're a hacker effectively. And that's cut everybody out. Now they do have apparently they've now got a solution. You just need to sort of get into every Windows instance that you've got and boot it into safe mode and remove a particular file. So it's got to start coming back online again. The big question is what on earth CrowdStrike thought they were doing and why they hadn't thoroughly tested this. So I don't know what one of the solutions will be, to put some kind of punishment onto any company that does this and mucks up.
But before you go there, I just want to add that anything that Kieren says is of his own opinion, and that we are friends with CrowdStrike, and we do actually like them and get on with them. I also do have some sympathy, because I think, CrowdStrike itself were targeted in the last 5 days for spam and phishing attacks themselves, and this is a huge problem. Microsoft themselves are in the top 10 of the tech media group, the top sector that is targeted for threats and abuse. And, as you say, though, this requires manual updating of each server. Now, you get the feeling that not all the world's servers in the world are maintained or supported by CrowdStrike. It seems to be just that CrowdStrike ones had auto updates, and it seems that some quite basic testing hasn't been done where we hope. And at least it's not, Emily, the sort of dreaded ransomware attack where...
Yeah, we've seen a few incidents over the last few years where there's either supply chain attacks or ransomware coming in through software updates, which is just like, your heart sinks at these things, because updating software is one of the few things that users can do to protect their systems. And if something really bad happens as a result of a software update, then that deters people from updating their software, which is actually what we want them to do.
A vicious cycle.
But these sort of supply chain attacks can have incredibly widespread damage, both geographically and across different sectors.
So we've got this idea that software should be perfect, that it's digital, it's binary, it's safe. Joanna, you've been doing a bit of testing, and you've been dealing with software that's been written by me and others, and has it been completely perfect?
No, sorry, Lucien. That's not
What?
I knew you were going to say that.
criticising your coding. Oh no. No, it's not going to be perfect the first time. Obviously, we're humans at the end of the day who are writing the code, so it's not going to be perfect. And
sometimes, yes, the changes happen because other things have changed, like the platform they're sitting on.
Yeah.
Another job you were doing was universal acceptance, the ability to support non-Latin script in machines. And there's still, these are email systems. These are mature systems of phone login accounts. You've been testing those, haven't you?
Yeah, and it's atrocious. There is no effort has been made to, you can tell when they built these platforms, no effort was made to make it universally accepting.
And just clarify what that means, universally accepting.
It means that Unicode characters can be entered perfectly, but
and for that means like different scripts, like Arabic script domain names or Chinese script domain names. Unicode is what we call the encoding of different scripts other than Latin script, right?
So you find that when you enter those into these platforms, they just refuse to
They've got bugs to start with.
Yeah, they've got bugs, they break, they aren't displayed properly. That should have been something that was dealt with ages ago.
So even these, Kieren, even these long-term historic pieces of software that have been robust in the field, as Joanna's saying, they still need some very fundamental edits and changes anyway.
Well, there's a terrible history behind, the sort of the lack of putting other languages other than English into software, and that's because all the software engineers were American. And well, not all of them, but a large number. And the vast majority of them only spoke one language. So I've had, when we were bringing in IDNs, that was a long time ago now, the number of conversations I had with people when they explained how they decided to provide the world's languages on the internet, it was mind-blowing how people would say, well, I sat down and I figured out Arabic. And then I thought, well, we'll assign this character this and this a character to this, with no understanding at all of the language. And you think that was translated across the world's languages, they work very, very different ways. So yes, unfortunately, right at the heart of, a long time ago, at the heart of a lot of software was this complete misunderstanding of other languages. And that is, how do you update all the software of the world? It takes a very, very long time.
And when you're dealing with threats and abuse like CrowdStrike, you're actually dealing with very live issues that you've not really been exposed to, or paths of attack that aren't really.
I'm really, obviously we're in the middle of this at the moment, so none of us really understand what has actually happened. But it does seem like a bad update of the Falcon software, which is CrowdStrike's real flagship software. And as Kieren said, they're a highly, highly respected cybersecurity company. But in one way, it's a little bit like, if you've got multiple illnesses and you have to take lots and lots of different medications, each one of those medications will cure one thing, but they might interact with each other in unpredictable ways that makes you sicker. And I think that the point you mentioned, Lucien, is sort of like it might be that they were fixing something else and then something unexpected happened.
Yeah,
and I think that sort of, when you're actually working in an ecosystem at a really low level, you're trying to fix a ton of stuff. It can seem awful, the results, because nobody anticipated that would happen. And of course we should all be perfect, but as Joanna says, nobody is, and all software has errors.
And one of the hardest things is to test getting through security, and you almost have to switch off security, don't you, to test some basic things. You almost have to bypass things, and then you create open doors. So it's a very interesting subject. Well, I think we've gone past the half hour, and so and this has been a fascinating discussion today. I want to say thank you to Joanna Grant.
No, thank you very much for having me.
We've you are a guest of honour. This also will become a historic thing that I hope that one day you will play to your grandchildren, because we're going to have lots of famous people on, and we're going to get we're estimated our PR company to have 1 million views a week in about 6 months' time. And so this is going to be enormous.
We're all going to be massively famous.
Famous and rich. And it's going to see off other competitive podcasts as well. And you were the first. And we will have you on again because you've been a fascinating topic today about quantum computing and also contributing towards the general discussion about the Microsoft global outage, which hopefully will shortly be dealt with, even if manually by everybody. Thank you very much. That was the Internet Seriously.